Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Afriani and I'm from Winesema, Banten. And I'm student postgraduate program, master degree in English education. Now I will share and review book with the title Teaching English as Foreign Language. So before I explain and tell about this book, the meaning I create this video for the middle text from subject issues method teaching English and foreign language. So before we going to explain about this book, I will tell you about the title of the book. Okay, the first book detail teaching English as a foreign language. So this book, second edition, we are known authors Geoffrey Fruchtwood, Christopher Bramfit, Roger Flavel, Peter Hill, and Anita Piskas. This book published in 1980 in University of London Institute of Education at London and New York. So in the book, in chapter 1 explain about English in the world today. So in English in the world today includes some point, and the first English as an international language, the second English as a first language and second language, the third English as a foreign language. So the fourth English is used in international affiliation, major debates at the United Nations and ETO, and the POP scanned, and the last English in the language of around 70% of the world's radio programs and 70% of the world's mail. Next, chapter 2. Chapter 2, teaching in the classroom. So, the previous chapter has described something of the role of English in the world today. It is against this background and in the kind of context described that English language teaching goes on, and it is clearly part of the professional of the teacher of English to foreigners to be aware of the context in which he is working and of how he is teaching first into the scheme of thing. In the classroom, teaching in the classroom, and some point. So the first overview of classroom technique, discussion on school organization, tip for creating a conductive learning environment, practical advice for managing student behavior, strategies for effective student engagement, importance of lesson planning and preparation. Okay, now we are going to chapter 3. Chapter 3 about the language and communication. Language and communication, exploration of the relationship between language and communication, and different form of communication and their role in the language learning, importance of understanding cultural context in language teaching, overview of language acquisition theories, discussion on the influence of the mother tongue and second language learning, and the last tips for promoting effective communication in the classroom. We all know in language and communication any kind of communication. So such as kind of communication. So some people use vocal noises, other physical movement or facial expression. So many employ a variety of method for communication. Okay, next now about the chapter number 4. Chapter 4 is basic principles. In this chapter, in discussing several aspects of language, such as the complexity of this essentially human the activity. Any point about the basic principle? In this chapter, an introduction to the basic principle of foreign language teaching, and the importance of learner motivation and judgment. So, this chapter discussion about the basic principle and some aspect of the teaching principle driven from the interaction of aspect and those files of the study which contribute to the theory and practice of the EFL teaching. So any discussion on creating meaningful learning experience. Okay, now we are going chapter number 5. Chapter 5 in this book about the pronunciation. We all know about the pronunciation. Teaching about the speech and can relate about the spoken language and practice in listening and speaking. So in pronunciation, we can see the slide exploration of the role of pronunciation in the language learning. Tips for teaching correct pronunciation, discussion on common pronunciation errors and how to address them. So next, any techniques for improving fluency and intonation for the speaking, and overview of pronunciation assessment method, and then importance of providing pronunciation practice opportunities. So learning to acquire the pronunciation habit of a foreign language, however, involves a large number of new skills, especially. Okay, it is about the chapter number 5. Next, chapter 6 about the listening and speaking. So we all know about the listening and speaking. Listening and speaking, one of the skill in teaching English. So listening is a passive skill and speaking is an active one. So it's the principle common to this and previous chapter that listening should precede speaking. Currently, it is impossible to expect a student to produce a sound which doesn't exist in the mother tongue or another sentence using this stress. And it's not possible to produce satisfactorily what one has not heard, the logical first step. Therefore, in attempting to achieve oral fluency or acquiring is to consider the learning ability to listening. So, in the chapter 6, listening and speaking. So, at some point like overview of effective listening and speaking skill, the importance of developing listening comprehension, then strategies for promoting active listening in the classroom, and then tips for and creating effective verbal communication. So next, any technique for improving speaking fluency and accuracy. So, and it discuss and assessing listening and speaking skill. Okay, next chapter 7. In the chapter about the reading. Reading, we can know about reading. Reading is complete or education about the method which were used by the teacher who in teaching is more the true than in that of reading. So in the slide no any point about the reading. So any important of reading skill in language learning, discussion on different reading strategies and approaches, technique for developing reading comprehension, tips for selecting appropriate reading materials, overview of reading assessment methods, and then promoting of reading as a lifelong learning habit. Okay, next about the chapter 8. In this book, chapter 8 about the writing skill. What the writing skill, and the acts of writing different from that of the talking. In the chat is the less spontaneous and more permanent, and the research which available for communication are few because we can't, as we do in conversation, interact with the listener and adapt as we go along. Okay, for the reason the conversation of writing tend to be less flexible than those of conversation, and the language which is used tend to be standard. If the goal of the English teacher is to be enable student to product fluent, accurate, and appropriate writing English. Okay, next about the chapter 9. Chapter 9 is about the errors, correction, and remedial work. In the chapter have some point about the first point, discussion on common errors in language learning, importance of error correction in the learning process, strategies for providing constructive feedback on errors, approaches to remedial work and individualism instruction, types for creating a supportive learning environment, consideration of learner attitude towards error. So this chapter has been concerned with good teaching and effective learning, but however good the teaching and however effective the learning, there will always be a place for remedial work of one kind or another, because it is beyond the capacity of a human being to absorb perfectly and retain identity everything he is present with. So from one point of view, okay, next about chapter number 10 about the assessment and examinations. Okay, we will see the point this chapter. Uh, Next chapter number 11 about young children learning English. About this chapter, English by younger children is by no means a common as at later stage and the nature of the young learner. Okay, next about chapter 12. Chapter 12, learning English in the secondary school. Same with the chapter others. This chapter explain about the overview of teaching English in the secondary school settings, a discussion on the challenges and opportunities of secondary school language learning, strategies for promoting active participation in language lesson, types for integrating technology into language instruction, overview of language support service for secondary school learners, so consideration of curriculum design and assessment practice. Next, but the chapter 13. 13 about the teaching English to adults. So, teaching English to adults about the consideration of a factor unique to the teaching English to adult learners, discussion on adult learning theories and principles, strategies for designing effective adult language courses, tips for creating a supportive and inclusive learning environment, overview of research and material for teaching adults, and then next consideration of the roles of motivation. Okay, the last chapter and chapter 14 about the English department. So English department, and then the chapter discuss in the past of the roles of the English department in promoting good language learning conditions. Yet those who visit school frequently can immediately tell when there is a well organized department because of the feeling of commitment and esteem which is generated by the member of the department, and this usually communicates itself to the student as well. So in this chapter, any general organization, consistent and sensibly police administration, and the head of department. So, okay, I think enough for result review this book about the teaching English as a foreign language. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.